The gospel lesson for Easter Sunday is in St. John's Gospel, the 20th chapter, beginning at the first verse. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. And so she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. And then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. And then the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." And when she said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." And Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. Here ends the gospel. We join together now in singing the song, Hymn of Promise. You may remain seated as we sing. I'd like you to use your imaginations this morning as though you have a big piece of paper in front of you. And on one side of the paper at the top, it says, "Once upon a time," and then there's those dots that they put after, which means you have to fill this in. Have you ever done one of these? Get a page of starting sentences and then you finish them, and then the psychologist says, "Oh, we're in big trouble." No, that isn't true. That's on one side, once upon a time. And then on the other side is, someday I will. Someday I will. Your story is so important. Every story is important. And, as we're raising children, you have stories about grandparents, great-grandparents, which they may never have seen, but other kinds of family stories that are important to tell. And those stories which are part of the family, which you don't think maybe should be told because they're not nice stories, I want to assure you that every family has a lot of those stories. You look around the room here and you say, "Oh, there's a perfect couple, there's a perfect person, that person's got it all together, this person is really sharp, blah, blah, blah." If you only knew, I'm telling you. It's true of all of us in this room. But all those parts of the story make up who we are. And it's important to learn those parts of the story. It's called integration in psychological terms. You integrate all these people who've made anything of you in this life, and then you make yourself over again. It's not like there's some little part of you there that's always there and is just going to come out. There is some of that. But most of it is what you make of yourself. What decisions you make, what choices you make, what you think is important, what you think is unimportant. And then you see the connections that weave life into something meaningful and good. Every once in a while, someone will say to me, "This thing happened to me," and I thought, "What the heck, this is meaningless, it doesn't mean anything." But now I see that it was the beginning of, and then they go on and tell a story, how that out of that experience, good or bad, they made something wonderful, something important, something that they rely on. And when you do that once upon a time thing, you should look for God in those past events. When were the times that you felt that God was present to you, when you needed God and you felt that God was there? Or maybe you felt God wasn't there. And what did that do to you? In those times when you needed God, and then suddenly discovered that something was happening, some promise was made, some beginning was started. The times when God seemed near is an important thing for you to remember in those events as you weave them together in your story. And someday how do you finish that sentence? We live in the future an awful lot, don't we? There's a phrase that I love, rehearsing the future. We rehearse the future. A lot of you do it with worrying. That's what I'm good at. I worry about everything. Everything is going to be not the way I wanted it to be. And we have to do some planning for the future. Obviously, that's the only sensible way to live. But much of what we think about the future is just out there in some foggy sense, and we have no control over it. And as you ponder these questions right now, I wonder what's going on in your head. I often think it would be great if I had a computer screen up here and you were all plugged in somehow but didn't know it. And then the thoughts would come up on the computer screen. And you'd know whether your thoughts came up, whether or not I ran screaming out of the building. And you would be the same if you saw my thoughts. What is this all about, this life? I want to read to you a story. This is a part of Fyodor Dostoevsky's life, the great author. He told the story of a time he was arrested by the Tsar and sentenced to die. This was when he was a younger man. The Tsar played a cruel psychological trick on people who rebelled against his regime by blindfolding them and standing them in front of a firing squad. They heard gunshots go off, but felt nothing. Then slowly they realized the guns were loaded with blanks. The Tsar was really a fun guy, huh? The emotional trauma that went with the process of dying without experiencing death had a transforming effect on people, as you could well imagine. It certainly had an incredible effect on Dostoevsky. He talked about waking up in the morning of his mock execution with full assurance that that would be the very last day of his life. As he ate his last meal, he savored every bite. Every breath of air he took was taken with an awareness of how precious it was. Every face he saw that day, he studied with intensity. He wanted every experience etched on his mind. And as they marched him into the courtyard, he felt the sun beating down on him, and he appreciated the warmth of the sun as never before. Everything around him seemed to have a magical quality to it. He was seeing the world as he had never been able to see it before. All of his senses were heightened, and he was fully alive. And after the captors removed his blindfold and he realized he had not been shot, everything about him changed. He became grateful to people he had previously hated. He became thankful for everything about life, but especially for life itself. Dostoevsky claims it was this experience that made him into a novelist and raised his sensitivities so that he could perceive dimensions of reality never known to him before. He was fully alive, seeing reality never known to him before. That's what the resurrection is about. That's what this story in the gospel is about. It's really about the present. It's not a once upon a time thing, a historical event, which becomes kind of a case study. And if you've done any Bible study and you read through all the Gospels, you see they all treat this very differently. So then you have to sort through it and do a scholarly interpretation of, well, what does this resurrection mean? And everyone in this room, I think, has a different idea of what really happened. None of us were there, so none of us know. But there are certain things that you take into life and you believe them and you hold on to them, and other things you say, well, it couldn't quite have happened that way, and everything in between. And the resurrection is not a someday thing. A lot of people make it a someday thing. When I die, heaven will be waiting for me, and all that that means for you and me. Someday, the resurrection will mean something to me, because then I, too, will share this life that Jesus promised. So you fill out the page with resurrection only on the someday I will side. Resurrection is about being fully alive today, seeing and hearing and tasting reality like never before, being present to this moment, to this time of life right now. Dostoevsky said on what he thought was his last day, everything seemed to have a magical quality to it. You remember thinking that very often? Oh, today is kind of magical. There's a magical quality to this. There's a magical quality to this one who sits across the table from me. There's a magical quality to these children, to these elders. There's a magical quality to the people that I know and have known for a long time. Do you feel that much? And do you pay attention when those times come? Do you just sit with those magical times and say life is good? In today's gospel, Mary Magdalene is a fascinating person in Jesus' life and ministry. Books have been written about her, and there's even been a movie that claimed that she and Jesus were married. So Mary Magdalene is an important part of the gospel story. And in this gospel lesson we read this morning, she's in a very personal crisis. The death of Jesus is that ultimate event in life. There's nothing more tragic that could happen to her, nothing more important in her life. Now, you know what those moments are like, because most of us in this room have had them. Those moments we know are ultimate moments when the world changed. Sometimes they're sad moments when a loved one dies, and we know that the world has changed forever. There are other kinds of moments, like when you fell in love. You fell in love, you walked away from that person who is now the one of your affection, and you think, wow, well, the world is different. Things are going to happen now. And when you have the first, those of us who've been fortunate enough, when you have the first child, I love talking to first parents with the first child. And they tell me what life is going to be like with that child. And I say, you have no idea. What about when that child's 30 years old and moves home, doesn't have a job? You know, you're looking at that? Let's not even go there, right? In some sense, Mary Magdalene is lost between memory, what she's experienced with Jesus, what she's seen him do, how she's seen him love and heal people, and hope, because she hoped his ministry was going to go on and she was going to see miraculous and wonderful things forever and ever because of who he was. That's the hope part. But now she's in the middle. She's in the middle of that, the memories of Jesus and the hope for what would be. She thinks the hope, her future, in fact, is destroyed by this crucifixion. Where is she now in life is the question she must be asking. Where does this leave me now that Jesus is gone? What is real? I thought he was the most real thing, and now he's gone. What is possible? I thought many things were possible, but now he's gone. Is anything still possible? And who am I now? You've had this experience, most of you, I think. Something big changes in life. Maybe it's a job change or something in your family or who knows what. And in your heart of hearts, you wonder, now who am I in this different place with this loved one gone? Those questions must be familiar to you. And so Mary Magdalene is lost. She's not lost in the present. She's lost in the past and in the future. She's so lost that when Jesus comes to her outside the tomb, she doesn't recognize him. And when he speaks, this is a great line. This would be kind of a comedy sort of a line. When he speaks to her, she thinks he's the gardener. Yeah, go away from me. You know, I got big fish to fry here, so I don't know what you're talking about. But when he says her name, Mary, she comes to the present. She realizes who he is. She sees him for the first time. She hears that voice which has changed her life, the voice of love, the voice of things that are eternal. You've had this kind of experience. You've had these experiences when someone calls you into the present in the midst of your agenda, which all of us have as we're running through life or trying to make sense of life or worrying about life. There is someone who calls you into the present and opens up all the present has to offer. I've told folks before, my youngest daughter, Sarah, when I was so busy and so wound up in ministry and had all kinds of meetings, my daughter, Sarah, when I would sit down, she would jump in my lap and hold my face like this and say, "Dad, I have something to tell you." I wish that would still happen sometimes, because I know I get distracted and a million things are going on, things to worry about. Every one of us needs somebody who comes to us and holds our face and says our name and says, "I have something to tell you." That's what the resurrection is about. To bring us into life in the present, not something historical, not something futuristic. And so we come into the present. And when we do, what have you got regrets that you think about? Are there losses in your lives or failures that you can remember? What about retirement security? Is that something some of you will worry about? How will our children do? You look at these little kids and they look so full of promise and they're so sweet and they're behaving so well now. What's their life going to be like as time goes on? God is here, we are told. Love is given to you. You are already forgiven, every one of you. God's promises are for you no matter what. Whatever you know or don't know about Jesus, you can know one thing right now. His whole life conveys one message to you and me. Anyone at any moment can start anew. Anyone at any moment can start anew. Mary Magdalene understood this when Jesus said her name, Mary. He knows your name too. He speaks your name as well. Amen. Would you please rise now and receive the benediction? And now may the Christ who walks on wounded feet walk with you on the road. May the Christ who serves with wounded hands stretch out your hands to serve. May the Christ who loves with a wounded heart open your hearts to love. May you see the face of Christ in everyone you meet, and may everyone you meet see the face of Christ in you. God be with us always. Amen.